I am Ember, the guardian of serenity. My ebony fur, featuring brilliant orange splashes, is altogether pristine and shimmers in the light. My eyes are what Serenity calls emerald green and see with the utmost clarity. My twitchy little nose can smell trouble for 50 miles away, and I keep my teeth and claws clean, sharp, and deadly just in case I have to use them to protect my girl. And I have had to more times than she realizes, and not just against her neighbor's stupid dogs chasing her down. I wear a bright orange collar with shimmering golden moons and stars designed upon it. It featured a bell and a crescent moon charm engraved with my name. This was a gift from Serenity after she found me in an old, abandoned cemetery as a kitten. When she found me, I thought that my mother was still alive, but as the human girl lifted me into her arms, she didn't seem to notice the fluffy calico she was tearing me away from. Unknowingly, she turned around and began to walk away. Perched atop Serenity's shoulder, I looked back and watched my mother fade from existence as she lied there, curled up in the arms of that odd statue of a winged human. It was then that I realized that she, in fact, had died protecting me from those coyotes the night prior. Holding me, comforting me, singing me to sleep, was nothing more than the ghost of my mother, and with Serenity's adoption of me, she could finally move on to the other side in peace. Of course, I was grieving at first when Serenity took me into her home, but she presented me with gifts and food and water and love. Her parents didn't want me sleeping in her bed, but I cried all night when she left me alone in the living room. It started off as a secret, her letting me curl up and sleep next to her head on her pillow, but everyone eventually accepted it, and I'm so glad they did. I'm not certain if it is normal for humans to get themselves into so much trouble, or if Serenity and her family were just exceptionally good at it. Either way, it wasn't long before I found myself earning my keep by protecting her, her brother, and her parents. The first instance was when the family went on vacation to the beach. I demanded they take me along, and thankfully they did. Yes, a cat in the ocean, not my finest moment. And of course I hated every minute of it, but if I hadn't have been there, Serenity would have lost her father. He was enraptured by a mermaid's siren song. It lured him out of the beachfront hotel and into the watery depths in the dark of the night. I had to swim out to him and smack his face to snap him out of it. I also bit that fish bitch right on her scaly bum, and she tasted just like salty tuna, so it wasn't all bad, I suppose. Serenity's mother was friends with an old witch that lives in a run-down ramshackle cabin deep in the woods. Her hair was wild, and her eyes were even crazier. She would always come to the family bearing gifts of fresh fruit and vegetables from her garden, though none of them seemed to realize her true identity. After all, only I was brave enough to follow her back to her home through those dark, eerie trees. Though I have yet to figure out whether or not she is wicked, she seemingly took a liking to me, so at least she has good taste. She understands that I cannot be her familiar, but she still gives me treats and lets me curl up and nap in her windowsill, while Serenity suffers at whatever hellscape she refers to as school. And the witch inadvertently taught me so much about the occult and magic simply by speaking to me about potions she was working on as she continuously stirred the glowing green and bubbling goop in her massive black cauldron. Other than to school, Serenity tended to bring me everywhere with her. Of course, I insisted. After all, it was my duty to protect her. Being the beautiful petite thing I am, I was able to sit upon her shoulder as she courageously went about her adventures, even after I grew up. Some of her friends took her to what they referred to as an abandoned mental hospital, and it was all but destroyed. I could barely tell that it was originally a building built by humans. Debris was scattered everywhere, the windows were shattered, and there were holes in the rooms upstairs letting us see up into them from the floors below. It was freezing inside, and despite the fact that it was summer, we could see our breath as little translucent clouds in the frigid air before us. The spirits there were full of rage and sorrow. Some of them were harmless, simply flowing in and out of the hallways, believing they were still alive. They even communicated with me, which is how I realized these poor souls were tortured in that place, horrifically experimented on by the hands of mad doctors and wicked nurses. That explained why it was so haunted. Others, however, were unfortunately darkened, violent, seeking vengeance, and although they were hidden in the shadows, I could easily sense them and the harm they intended. They wanted to torture the living in the very same ways that they themselves were abused. Thankfully, whenever I were to hiss at something that she couldn't see, Serenity knew to get the hell out of there. I had trained her well. Unfortunately, some of her little friends didn't listen. We waited and waited, and finally they were reunited with us outside in the moonlight, but they were trembling, saying that something was screaming, wailing in the depths of the building like a wounded animal. They could hear chains rattling and phantom footsteps behind them. Some of them even had things thrown at them from the dark, or felt an eerie cold breath on the backs of their necks. Alas, her friends were never really the same after that. A few years later, Serenity's little brother Justice was having some of his own annoying little friends over to visit. They stayed the night, and one of them, a particularly obnoxious boy, brought out something called a spirit board from his backpack, and they somehow began to speak to horrifying creatures through it by running a strangely shaped piece of wood across its surface. I believe, from the questions they were asking, that they thought they were speaking to ghosts within the afterlife, but these were nothing like any spirits I had ever seen, and I have seen quite a number of them. For starters, if one is able to speak to ghosts, they aren't in the afterlife. They're stuck here on this mortal plane. Otherwise, they aren't ghosts at all. There's something else entirely. At first, I thought they may have actually been communicating with beings from the afterlife, but deep down I knew that wasn't possible, not for them anyway. These children were novices, after all. Perhaps the Witch of the Woods could do such a thing? Then again, despite her madness, she was probably too smart to try something as dangerous as that. Whatever those kids were talking to, it was giving them detailed instructions on how to draw a summoning sigil on the floor, and despite my hissing and smacking at him and the spirit board, Justice locked me out of his bedroom and proceeded to do just that. When a glowing red light appeared in the crack between the hallway floor and the locked bedroom door, I knew I had to act. I ran into the shadows of Serenity's room, slipping beneath the starlight trailing across her ceiling, and leaped onto her bed. Meowing like crazy, I gently pawed at her face to awaken her. "Ember?" she asked hazily, sitting up in her pink bed. She then rubbed the sleep from her eyes. "What's going on?" I immediately hopped down from the bed and ran toward her open doorway. Lingering there, I looked back up at her, watching her throw the blanket from her body and step down onto the soft carpeted floor. She rushed toward me, her pink nightgown flowing around her as I led her down the shadowy hallway, meowing loudly and concernedly. By the time she was able to bust down her brother's door, he was being held up by an infernal horned creature, and suddenly I remembered the wise witch's words. This was a demon. Of course, Serenity and the little boys couldn't see it. All they saw was Justice being pressed up against a wall, his feet dangling above the carpet. Before I knew it, I had shot into the air and sank my teeth and claws into that demon's face and shoulder. It roared and dropped Justice to the floor, backing away and swinging about in a desperate attempt at throwing me off. But I had my hooks in it, and I continued to jerk the hoofed devil backward through the crowd of shocked children, pulling it back to the summoning circle. And just its left foot went in, it magically was sucked back to the depths of hell. As soon as I landed on the hardwood floor, I smeared the enchanted ring through the carpet with my paws, causing its magical glow to fade at once. It seemed as if it was made from some kind of red paint, which I actually had trouble getting out of my fur, which is really annoying. But as Serenity's parents came into the room in their pajamas, I took a hold of the spirit board between my teeth and ran out into the hallway between them. Overhearing the adult humans questioning their offspring, I set the demonic tool against the coffee table in the dark living room. It was slanted, sinking into the carpet. I then hopped onto the table and leaped onto the spirit board, breaking its thin, flimsy frame in half. After that, I hid the pieces deep under the couch among the dust bunnies and lost socks, never to be seen again. After that, Serenity and Justice both started going to church with their parents more often. Of course I went with them, sitting on my girl's shoulders, listening to that angry man up front screaming about something or another every Sunday. I found it odd and a bit unnerving, but the humans seemed to be getting something out of it. He gave their mother something called a cross to hang in the house after she told them about the experience. She did so right above the big magical portal box in the living room, which I believe is called a TV, if I remember correctly, among the pretty little pictures of the family on the wall. It was wooden with the shimmering colors in the center, and though I didn't know how it would help exactly, I did find it to be quite beautiful. Still, despite all my adventures, I was completely unprepared for what was coming. Right before Serenity graduated high school, whatever that means, she began frequenting the cemetery that she had found me within. Of course, she always took me with her, and I was happily perched upon her shoulder. However, I began to feel as if we were being watched. No, not just watched. Hunted in the night. Each visit made me more and more aware of it until I had my back arched, my fur sticking straight up, and I was hissing at every falling leaf. And finally, the predator emerged from the surrounding shadowy forest. He was pale and thin, but an altogether handsome human man. Dressed in an all-black church suit, with his wet-looking ebony hair slicked back, he He possessed the most crimson eyes I have ever seen, and around these blood-colored eyes was dark powder similar to the kind that Serenity used when getting ready for school, though I had yet to see a male wear it before. Strangely, Serenity greeted him with a smile. While I hissed at him upon her shoulder, she introduced herself, her eyes locked onto his. Holding out her hand for him to shake, she tilted her head. He took her hand and bowed before her, kissing it. Standing back up straight, he revealed the hand that had been hidden behind his back, as well as the red, thorny rose within it. "My name is Nyx," he said, in what I would learn was an accent that even Serenity couldn't figure out. When she swooned at this disgusting display, I knew we were in trouble. I watched helplessly as she took the flower into her hands and accidentally pricked her finger on one of the thorns. A drop of blood slowly slid down her thumb as she held it up in surprise. Suddenly, Nyx leaned in and licked the blood from her finger. He did so slowly, sensually, like a tomcat strutting through an alleyway. His eyes locked onto those of Serenity, and in doing so, he was close enough for me to take a swipe at, and you'd better believe I did. My claw severed through his white skin with ease, but what happened after that is what shocked me. His blood was black and eerily thick. Nyx backed away, and Serenity put me onto the ground. As she rushed to his aid, I sniffed my paw and the man's black blood that was now covering it. My back arched once more, and my tail shot straight up. This viscous liquid absolutely reeked. It made me gag. It smelled exactly like rotting flesh. This was not a human. It was a creature of the undead. "I'm fine," he growled, regaining his composure, although now his glare was like two claws stabbing into my very soul. "Why do you have such a wretched beast with you?" Serenity scoffed repeatedly, glancing between him and I. No, Ember isn't a beast. She's my companion. I'm not quite sure why she's so upset right now." I hissed at him again. He seemed to flinch as if he were afraid of me. Good. Seeing how upset I was, Serenity lifted me into her arms and told him goodbye. As we turned away, however, he called to us, promising her that she would run into him again. Thankfully, she didn't reply or even turn back around, but she did smell the rose he gave her and swoon for a second time. Over the next few weeks, she went to see him a lot without me, locking me in her room when she went. And when she returned, she could not shut up about that stranger. She was completely smitten with him, telling me how he played violin and wrote poetry. Not that I understood either of those things, but I could see how her blue eyes lit up and sparkled when she spoke of him, and I was growing more concerned with each story she told me. However, her mother and father were infuriated. She would fight with them about it constantly. Apparently, this young man was older than her, and she was coming home later and later, even on school nights. Her parents were afraid for her safety. She had never disobeyed them before this. It was almost as if the more her parents resisted, the deeper Serenity's desire grew for this man. It had only been a few weeks since they had met, but she was already telling me that she wanted to run away with him and marry him. I don't know what that means, but it sounds horrible. Writing his name in her school notebooks, drawing him, poorly I may add, it was all just too much. Late one night, he awoke us both by knocking on her second-story bedroom window as if he were levitating in the air outside of it. I watched her get up, open the window, and kiss his lips. He asked her if he could come in, and of course she gave him permission, not even asking him how he had gotten up there. Serenity opened the window and thankfully left it open. Nyx climbed in, and of course I hissed at him again as he walked past me as I sat upon the head of her pink and sparkly bed, and as they kissed, I nearly coughed up a hairball. But then, he moved her vibrant blonde hair away from her neck and ear, revealing her heart-shaped dangling earrings. He then gently moved those out of the way as well, and proceeded to seemingly smell her neck, and the scent somehow intoxicated him, his eyes rolling back into his head as he blinked repeatedly, parting his lips in desire. "Pause," P-O-W-S, a voice in my mind rang, or pause, P-A-U-S-E, rather. Remembering the witch's wise words, my every strand of fur stood up straight and my back arched yet again, my tail pointing toward the ceiling. This was a vampire. Serenity was under his dark influence, but how would I defeat a vampire? Had the witch told me their weaknesses? I racked my genius feline brain, retracing my memories of her and her words, but nothing further came to me on the subject. They were kissing with their tongues in that odd way that humans do and backing up onto the bed. My concern for her and my nausea for this sight were fighting within me. The only thing I knew to do was run and find the witch, and so out the window I went. I leaped onto the branch of the massive oak tree next to it, sinking my claws into the rough bark. Looking back, I had hoped that Serenity would have been concerned for me, but she hadn't even noticed my departure. They were still disgustingly kissing on the bed. I had to act fast. Turning around, however, I noticed a large owl. It twisted its head completely around and blinked its massive yellow eyes at me. "Ember?" he asked. I stood there for a moment, confused. "Yes, and I have to go. My girl's in trouble, and— Ah! My master has told me all about you." This struck me silent. Master? So the witch found a familiar after all. He nodded. "She misses you, of course. In fact, she has me flutter around here sometimes to make sure you and your family are all right." I shook my head. "Well, we aren't. My girl is about to become a vampire's thrall, or worse. Have you tried a crucifix?" "What in the litter box is a crucifix?" He laughed. "A cross." My mind flashed back to the one Serenity's mother was given. "Not yet, but we have one," I stated, turning back to him. "What would I do with it?" "He will be completely averse to it. As long as you hold it before you, toward him, with your girl behind you, he won't be able to harm her." I nodded. "I'm on it." Turning around, I hopped back into the open window. "And I will find some garlic," that odd owl called to me just before flapping his wings and taking off into the night. Unsure of what he meant, I dismissed it and ran past Nyx and Serenity. Darting through the crack in her bedroom door, I shot through the hallway and down the stairs into the living room. There, I leaped onto the TV stand and into the air. Clamping my sharp teeth around the wood of the cross, I ripped it from the wall and landed safely on my feet, and immediately I ran back upstairs. As soon as I entered the room, Nyx could feel it. He let out a hiss of his own and crawled backwards up the pink-painted wall of Serenity's bedroom. Glaring down at me, his beautiful visage melted away, revealing the undead creature he truly was. He was bald, with sunken-in eyes and pointed ears. His nose looked as if it had decayed off, revealing little more than nostrils. Those spindly, gnarled fingers were eerily long and thin, ending in black claws of his own. The most peculiar change was that his back was now arched forwards, his shoulders pushed up to his head. The scent of horrifically decayed flesh suddenly filled the room. At the same time, that rose that she'd placed in a sparkling vase on her vanity was suddenly just as shriveled and dead as he was, and the trance he had Serenity under was finally broken. My girl looked around confusedly as if she had just awakened from a dream. Seeing him hissing and snarling at me from the corner above her made her gasp, however. She hopped off of the bed and backed herself against the wall next to me as I stepped forward, gripping the wooden cross in my mouth. Slowly, cautiously, I forced him toward the open window. I was almost trembling, I was so afraid, but I knew I had to protect Serenity. Nyx hissed again, glaring at me with his cold, dead eyes crawling through it backwards. Suddenly, a string of garlic bulbs shot and looped around his neck and yanked him down to the ground, and all was silent for a moment. Serenity and I both shot toward the window. There we saw Nyx pinned to the grassy ground of her backyard by a long rope of tied-together garlic. He couldn't move at all, and it was bothering him so much that he began to vomit that strange black blood. "Ember!" a familiar voice called from the dimly lit street. It was the witch, and her owl familiar was sitting upon her shoulder just like I always did with Serenity. In her hand was a sharpened stick. A wooden stake. "Take this." She tossed it to me. I leaped into the air and caught it within my mouth. Flipping through the skies, I aimed its sharp end toward Nyx's chest as I plummeted down. It stabbed into his heart, and he immediately burst into the flames of hellfire that he once hid within him. Serenity ran over from the back door of the house and scooped me up from the flames. We watched as they slowly died down, revealing nothing but the scorched earth and cooked garlic behind. I pushed my head against her chin as she sweetly kissed my cheek. After that, seemed to return to normal, as normal as things could have possibly been for this family. The witch returned to the woods with her owl. Serenity's parents never realized that Nyx had come over that night. She told him that she had broken up with him because he wasn't a good influence on her, and she started getting ready for something called college. Apparently, college is just high school that you pay for. Why she wanted to continue the thing that she had complained about for years is beyond me, but I went with her, of course, and we settled into her dorm room, which just looked like a large closet to me. And as we sat upon her little gray bed, she held me on her chest and stroked me as I purred. "You know, I never really told you why I named you Ember." She began gazing up at the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars she pasted onto the ceiling. "It's because of your orange splotches. You're a tortie, a tortoiseshell cat, the most beautiful cat I've ever seen at that. And when you saved me from that emo bitch of a vampire, that fire, those flames and glowing embers bursting out of him against the black of the night, It looked just like you, and the light in you. It's so bright, so vast that it lights up every dark night and guides me home after every adventure we share. I love you." She then looked down at me as I meowed, telling her I loved her too. She smiled, grateful tears filling her beautiful blue eyes, and I saw my reflection in them the same way I saw it in my mother's all those years ago.